welcoming you all to SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence Forum. We are initiating the continuing series with the sole objective with our simple, straight, neutral, practical, in-depth, thought-provoking analysis and projections to prepare both at macro level government with the rules of engagement and at micro level more broader stakeholders including employers, employees, and society at large, to create more viable options on dynamic global trade platform. The customer-centric global options requires not only traditional conventional approach, but critical need of time, CTP, critical thinking process, and systematic thinking, the ability to think outside the box to create possibilities that enhances grassroots trade outcomes. We will be continuously emphasizing in our continuing series the importance of global harmony, peace, understanding, and wider collaboration for global trade benefits to spread and penetrate literally every country on the planet, both developed and developing countries. Our global trade research, analysis, projection, discussion filters out both market and competitive intelligence and prepare all trade entities in advance to prepare and implement effective, viable options in time-sensitive manner that brings the broader positive outcomes. Welcoming you all to SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence Forum. In our current session, showcasing the concerning trade analysis intelligence projection, high probability that Canada will not get a trade deal with United States. From the very start of our Strategic Global Market Intelligence Forum, we indicated when government signs trade agreements, especially free trade agreement, the broader objective happens to be equal fairness and mutual regional economic prosperity, provided all the signatory state tries to the common forum and tries to understand that common theme. So the stronger part of the theme happens to be each member state needs to support, sustain, and strengthen each other. And the free trade agreement can bring the right prosperity, and at the grassroots level, everyone can benefit. But if one member state tries to dominate on trade, and the domination of trade means not only trying to give the solution, trade solution, but also trying to almost replace some of the respective industry that is prevailing in member state, then the free trade agreement comes under deeper check. So the current concerning session that we are trying to project in advance, that Canada will not get a trade deal with United States, we are trying to bring on the backdrop of the revamped, retitled USMCA. United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, where the three member states, Canada, United States, and Mexico, and happens to be one of the most lucrative, profitable, and revenue-generating global trade agreement, almost covering 31% of global economy. So from its very inception in 1994 till its first ratification that had gone in 2020, the USMCA happens to be a powerful global free trade agreement where all the three member states had benefited. So the core strength of USMCA, the world's #1 buying in-depth capital market, United States, which happens to be very receptive on regional platform to its northern neighbor Canada and southern neighbor Mexico, and integrated in a way making it a powerful trade bloc comprising of almost 31% of the global trade revenue generation. So if the three member state integrates on equal and fairness platform, it can be a very powerful trade platform. But the challenge for USMCA, with on parallel with the European Union trade bloc, European Union trade bloc that comprises of 26 plus member state, but its integration based on one uniform currency, euro. So when you trade with one integrated currency, the trade that is happening with member state, it will not eat out others' trade platform. In short, will not be creating trade deficit. On the other hand, with the powerful global free trade agreement platform USMCA, the challenge happens to be the trade between the member state not happening in one integrated uniform currency. So each country maintaining its own currency, Canada with Canadian dollar, US with US dollar, and Mexico with Mexican peso. So when you put at par US dollar with Canadian dollar and Mexican peso, both weak, and if it's not controlled, check corrected, both the partners with trade can eat out into US trade platform. In short, they can create serious trade deficits. And that is what we can try to see from 1994 to 2014. But the ratification tried to bring some correction, but still the reality happens to be the deficits getting widening up. And especially post-pandemic scenario, when we are trying to say Mexico, especially on nearshoring platform, has become now United States' #1 trading partner. So on USMCA, we are showcasing that US still require partners, especially within the region, but the broader objectives had changed. So in our projection, Mexico will still be a part of USMCA, but Canadian position comes under big question mark. So in our current session, we will be trying to bring the strategic insight, all the proactive signals that's indicating high probability that Canada will not be landing with a trade deal with the United States. So we are putting forward the projection analysis on the phrase, history happens to be the most effective platform that showcase what's in store in the near future. So the way we are trying to say Canada negotiating on the trade deal with the United States, now almost 9 months, it seems that it is exactly the same platform 2016 to 2020. Canada, with full surprise that President Trump will win the election. So it is not the first time, it is the second time he happens to be in White House, but the way they are getting on the negotiation platform happens to be exactly they started in 2017. It seems Canada not learning, and the broader objective of the ratification of NAFTA that turned into USMCA. And during 2016 to 2020 also, the broader objective happens to be not only the national debt need to be brought to a balanced level, but also the wider trade deficit, how the way it can be balanced, that it can be much more complementary. So both the scenario, US national debt and the trade deficit, both widening up, and that is where they would like to see a solution from Canada. But when we are trying to say Canada not learning, means it is basically getting on negotiation, but more like a dictating force. And the catch here happens to be how the way they can solve the puzzle, being a complementary partner to narrow down the deficit and be a complementary partner and trying to support, strengthen US respective industry. So the catching phrase on free trade agreement: equal, fair, and complementary. But on the reverse side, if we are putting in-depth import imprints, trade imprints, and the wider deficit, then it will be seriously coming under check. So when Canada tries to say that, hey, they trusted United States to a larger extent, remain complacent, and worked everything on trust, confidence with United States, and not looking for any other trading partner, the reality settles in. The reason why Canada's 85% economy, directly or indirectly, depending on the trade with United States, because there happens to be no other buyer with deep financial pocket the way United States happens to be. So it is not like Canada had signed the free trade agreement only with United States and completely depending on it. United States always happened to be in dictating position prior to 1994 when NAFTA came into implementation, but throughout NAFTA scenario as well. And they had dictated the term, and the moment they felt that the trade trying to create deeper deficit with each respective industry, with penalties, quotas, tariffs, they had corrected. So when you try to see the free trade agreement that Canada had signed, Canada has more than 15 free trade agreement that covers 51 countries. But in reality, how much export revenue it generates that helps Canadian economy happens to be the big question. So the core part of the negotiation that required not only the trade dependence on United States, but being the world's buying power, how the way we can be a complementary trade partner. But if we try to get involved with deeper import footprints that not only creating trade deficit, but threatening some of the core industry in United States, then the challenge can be immense. Same way, wines. The strongest name comes from France, Italy, Spain, compared to the Canadian wines. You can try to take the dairy industry. And when we are trying to talk about dairy, cheese, all the way to chocolates, there is no way in global competition Canada stands in front of European Union. In short, less of export, more of import. If we are trying to see other industry, for example, let's try to see steel, aluminium, they are trying to look towards bigger market that can try to purchase all that rather than trying to get from Canada. And the most critical Canadian export, automobile. How much interest in European Union market? If you try to see the European Union majors like Germany, with its strong automobile platform like Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, they are looking for a strong presence in Canada rather than the Canadian automobiles getting into European Union. And again, just trying to bring the geographical reality about European Union, the second smallest continent on the planet. So the vehicles that are assembled in Canada, US, especially Ford, GM, Stellantis. Stellantis happens to be the European one, but the broader platform, Chrysler, Dodge, almost negligible presence because the second smallest continent means roads over congested and parking lots small, narrow. So there is no way American automobile can fit into those market. So it is more of European exports to North America and primarily to Canada as well. So it is not only the German major with Stellantis having presence in Italy to France. They are all looking for the possibility of more export rather than Canadian automobile imports. And if you can try to see The similar scenario like Canada as a powerful base for petroleum and natural gas, but it comes with an additional logistic cost that makes the whole process expensive. Rather than trying to procure all those petroleum natural gas either from Middle East or from the North Sea, that includes even Norway, and all that possibility emerging. So what we are trying to showcase, Canada needs to come down to reality. Its broader buyer on global trade platform happens to be United States. So the reason why Canada's 85% economy directly, indirectly related to US, the simple uh, truth that settles in, United States happens to be the biggest buying market. And because of the regional proximity, sharing the world's longest land border, where logistic cost can be minimized, that is where United States had become the strength that Canada requires on its trade platform. So that is where Canada need to come down to terms that they cannot take that position for granted, and rather than dictating, needs to be a complementary partner where it needs to address the widening deficit and trying to balance where not only the trade but also its internal economy can be strengthened to a large extent. Because, like the way we had indicated, history happens to be the most effective platform that tries to showcase what is in store in the near future. It seems the current scenario almost playing like in 2016, and to be more precise, uh, the example that we would like to showcase at micro level, Canada's number one conglomerate, Bombardier, the only entity that happened to be uh, in the top 50 Fortune 500 list. And when Bombardier Aerospace got the 75C series deal with Delta Airlines with additional 50 aircraft option, and exactly after 1 year, Boeing trying to claim on dumping and the unwarranted subsidies, investigation needs to be brought in, and you can try to see uh, the scenario when US International Trade Commission took that in 2017 June, and within months you can try to say the Department of Commerce are trying to see serious violation of subsidies and of around 220%, and the investigation started in September 2017 and had lasted less than 3 months, and they were able to track not only on the subsidies platform Canada but also UK with the Belfast operation, where they can try to see 220% subsidy, and the total duty that they levied on British aerospace, 292%. So Bombardier, that happened to be the ultimate conglomerate Canadian entity in the top 50 Fortune 500. You can try to see within 9 months the unfounding of Bombardier. It happened to be the world's leading train maker, but within 9 months they sold the whole division to Alstom, the French major, for almost $10 billion. And the most lucrative Bombardier Aerospace also got divided in the sense that its commercial jet manufacturing platform was bought by Airbus Industry and Mitsubishi, and Bombardier, almost skin to skeleton level, now happens to be just operating the business jet platform. So this is the concern, that when the trade deal comes into critical introspection, where not only violation of the terms that they had agreed on free trade agreement, it can really create serious repulses in relationship. And the way we took the platform for granted that it is going to mutually benefit in the long run, it's not going to happen. And the concern here is exactly like the Bombardier. 8 years from now, the US MCA agreement on ratification as of July 2026, you can try to see in September itself, it had been brought. And the consensus is being drawn what needs to be done when they are trying to bring Mexico and Canada on a platform, not only addressing this nation, US positioning with other trade partners on global trade dominance, and US dollar remains as international trade currency. And as US revisiting US MCA ratification platform early and given 90 days extension to Mexico, Canada needs to be concerned and needs to act in a complementary way uh, to not only engage but need to create a deal that not only address Canada's economic requirement but also strengthen US trade platform. And the concern part here, there happens to be no replacement US as the biggest buying market and the strength over the decades it had brought to Canada. Canada is not critically understanding the current trade gravity scenario uh, of US as a platform that has no substitution. And Canada right now on global trade platform happens to be in a checkmate position. So if US not buying, which market can be the one that can give Canadian export the strength that they require? So the reality, if you can try to evaluate Canada's number two trading partner, China. So on November 1, 2024, jointly with the United States, Canada put 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle to make it sure the exponential growth that we had trying to see in neutral markets like Australia, not very much repeated in North America. So that 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicle had not went very well uh, with the Chinese trade platform, and as a result, you can try to see China, that happens to be the biggest buyer of Canada's agriculture produce, especially canola. They put 75% plus tariff, and especially the seafood that comes from the Canadian Maritime Province, all had come down under that trade check. So the scenario happens to be, if Canada wants to see that correction, they need to do the correction on that 100% electric vehicle tariff. So if Canada trying to correct, like the way the current Prime Minister trying to do the balancing act, so he will be prioritizing one industry over other, and it means one province will get priority over another. And the strength of unity that we had seen with the 10 provinces and 3 territory in Canada, the start of the year, with all settling at grassroots level, can create divisive effect, where it will be just everyone trying to come down on self-interest and prioritization. So the catch with China almost looks like impossible, means if that 100% tariff being removed, and trying to have a kind of a balancing act towards agriculture and seafood produce. So the big question needs to be asked, why the American majors like GM, Ford, and the Stellantis platform, especially Chrysler, Dodge, and all, why they need to keep on investing on Canadian platform, although for almost a century they had invested, but with the trade platform wide open for China, is it worth to continue that investment tradition in Canada? And the core automobile sector can very much come into play. So, if not China, the buyer to US, then the other approach or the other option, to be more precise, European Union. But we had already clarified European Union trying to find a buyer rather than allowing its platform to be imported. So then the only other platform with one of the world's biggest consumer base happens to be India, with 1.47 billion population, can be a powerful consumer base. But the challenge for Canada, because of the political differences, and especially in the last 2 years that happens to be tensed, uh, it seems for a suitable replacement uh, towards US market, we are not trying to see in the nearest horizon. And this is the sentiment that needs to be settled with Canadian negotiator when they are trying to get on USMCA platform. So the checkmate position makes it impossible, uh, especially post COVID, where most developed government running uh, deep debts, and they want to correct their balance of payment with wider exports. It seems that Canada happens to be in a very, very cornered position where options are very, very limited. So, Canada needs to understand the trade gravity scenario, that there happens to be no replacement to United States, and we cannot take the position for granted. And how the way we can be a complementary partner towards U.S. national debt, and especially narrowing the wider trade deficit. And that is where Canada will land with a deal. Otherwise, uh, the high probability projection that on USMCA, it seems US will be forging the trade agreement with Mexico, and Canada's position coming into a complete question scenario. We are going to provide 5 strategic insights giving strong indication Canada will not get a trade deal with US. The very first strategic insight: President Trump and his administration's vision of strategically integrating and strengthening the Arctic belt from Alaska to Greenland. The resultant Canada's physical, social, and economic integration is a natural and integral process of this strategic vision. The second strategic insight: historical precedents of Canadian US MCA negotiation. The evolution of trade free NAFTA to restrictive US MCA from 2016 to 2020 showcased Canada's complete unwillingness, Mexico signing months well ahead, overdragging of 4 years towards ratification, and the final signing 2 hours before the very final deadline. Learning from the past, this time around, no dragging space. President Trump administration very much focused, determined towards real outcomes. The third strategic insight: critical Canadian leadership vacuum at global level. No political leader of any political stripes, liberals, conservatives, or NDP, can engage and bring constructive trade results. The fourth strategic insight: Canadian negotiating approach as dictating force wrong as compared to the needed complementary force approach. Retaliations, boycott, anti-US sentiments, offloading US product services, and promoting, recognizing, appreciating consumer behavior opposing US trade platform, making Canada's trade deal impossible. And the very final strategic insight concerning trade signals reflection that includes President Trump's repeated assertion not satisfied with the outcome expected from Canadian side. Also, Trump administration top officials continuous negative failed report and a wide comparison the way Mexican president and trade team negotiating in a balanced, subtle, reflective and engaging manner compared to Canada. And as Canadian economy and respective industry crumbles, troublemaking claim financial assistance provided to industry qualifying as subsidies, a complete no-no in a free trade agreement. We will now showcase each strategic insights in detail. The very first strategic insight of President Trump and his administration vision of integrating and strengthening the Arctic belt from Alaska to Greenland and Canada in between, an integral process. The strategic idea of integrating the Arctic belt in development happens to be there for a long time, but it gained momentum last year when, in the dinner meeting, the ex Prime Minister Justin Trudeau being asked by President Trump why he should be removing the tariffs, and the ill informed response that it will be completely destroying Canadian economy. So he gained that momentum and putting it into full implementation mode even before coming down to the White House. The very second week of January 2025, making it very clear that he wants to integrate Canada, economic, social, and physical integration, but the force that he will be using economic and primarily through tariff. So after coming down to White House, we are trying to see that reflection started with the control of illegal migration and fentanyl. But the correction that needs to be very much there. And from the Canadian side, the resources that required to consistently deliver that outcome that you was expecting, almost like 24/7, 365 days. Not only the capital, the resources very much missing. And Canada and US shares the world's longest land border, but the reality settles in. Canada doesn't have the human resources, neither the capital, to give that secured, well-protected outcome. So the catch here is the expectation drawn on fentanyl and illegal migration restriction and the broader outcome that needs to be brought that shows Canada as a true complementary partner that tries to take the interest of US on national security also equally critical. And the scenario what emerges here is President Trump on national security trying to put concepts like 5% of the GDP needs to be contributed towards NATO. And till date, Canada not even able to contribute 2.7%. And 3% is a far cry. Now it is 5%, and this happens to be almost 150 billion of its GDP, totally impossible. And not only it is limited to NATO contribution, but also on national security, and that integration of Arctic belt, the golden dome that he is trying to put forward, the initial costing that he showcased to Canada, around 60 billion plus, now more than 78 billion. But the question happens to be where the money from Canadian side happens to be. Not only the money, what we are trying to talk about the capital, where the human resources. Canada has the second largest land, but doesn't have a physical human force to literally defend. So from Second World War onwards, Canada happens to be an integral part of US national security, especially from Cold War times, and it had been giving that protection, and that is where he had showcased the wider deficit that we are trying to see between Canada and US. Not only the traded good, the wider deficit happens to be the 24/7, 365 days security protection that United States gives to Canada. And Canada lacking that capital, that resources, and uh, the the outcomes that will be drawn, Canada will not be able to sustain the requirement that President Trump administration team trying to put forward. So the tariff that is completely crumbling uh, Canadian economy, especially from October 1 onwards, and a new industry being added that includes pharmaceuticals, uh, film production outside US, to lumber. And if there is no trade deal, Canada happens to be in a very precarious position, and it will be resulting towards erosion of economic prosperity, and the integration of Canada into US, uh, that look almost impossible, but it can gain grounds of momentum. The second strategic insight: historical precedents of Canadian USMCA negotiation. During President Trump's first term, 2016 to 2020, the very first hour in White House after it being inaugurated, he revoked NAFTA, paving way for the USMCA negotiation. So the precedents that Canada tried to put forward, not only the unwillingness, but more than 20 rounds of negotiation that had gone more than 3 years plus, had showcased it in a very negative taste. So the intention happened to be not only to find a common ground, but to keep on dragging. And a US president term happens to be 4 year. And if they can drag almost towards 4 year possibility, NAFTA can remain intact. But Mr. Trump and its administration team, although it took more than 3 years, but Canada, more than Canada, the Mexican willingness to come on board, and Canada left with no option but signing at the last minute, all had given a kind of a different insight how the way the trade negotiation needs to be in the second term. So if you try to see very closely, this time around, they are learning from the past. They are very sure what Canada can try to do, what try to reflect. So from the very first year, and under the trade czar, Harvard doctorate, Dr. Peter Navarro, who happens to be not only a very effective economist, but his sense of global social economy and its implication very much reflected. And that is where he is trying to make it sure, along with President Trump's vision, how the way the negotiation needs to be, and what definitive milestone needs to be. So it is not going to be like 2016, it started, and when the ratification Canada signed in 2020, it's not going to be in that similar way. This time around, they are very specific, focused, determined with milestone, and also the concerning scenario of Canadian integration into US. So they are one by one trying to cover each industry with tariff, and its impact happens to be very clear, and the reflection is where they are trying to bring not only Canada but also Mexico on the revamp platform of USMCA ratification. And like the way in our previous session also we indicated, the correction of NAFTA to USMCA included the sunset clause, the expiry date of NAFTA turned to USMCA every 5 years. And the current USMCA sunset happens to be July 2026, but you can try to say in September itself they had brought it to the platform, trying to gain grounds, how the way that constructive pact needs to be brought in. But that extra 90 days exemption given to Mexico also giving a clear-cut indication that US very much committed to get a deal with Mexico, but that is not very much in the nearest horizon for Canada. And the reflection, the way it's moving, it will not be taking time to July 2026. Within 90 days, and again, like the way we had indicated, history happens to be the most effective teacher. So what happened in 2016 to 2020, it is going to be very much reflected. And it seems that it is the same scenario that is being repeated. And surprisingly, Mexico, with that 90 days exemption, very high chances will be coming on board, and Canada trying to find itself in a dismal position. So the very recent visit of the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney to Mexico and trying to sign agreement doesn't mean that there is going to be a very strong trade going to go between Canada and Mexico. So the reality happens to be both their export tries to impede, tries to restrict each one's balance of payment. So they are trying to showcase to US that they are still an unified force under USMCA, and if given an opportunity, don't get surprised. One can throw the other, and Canada had done repeatedly to get that single straight hand trade deal with US. So Mexico knows the same scenario from 2016 to 2020, but the way the Mexican president, in a very subtle, reflective way, with the trade team trying to negotiate, tries to give that indication, plus the 90 days exemption, that Mexico will be coming on board and Canada will be finding itself in a very negative spot without a trade deal. And that situation can become really precarious. And the question, how the way it all ended, so it is a reflection what happened during the first term of US President Trump's 2016 to 2020, and what correction Canada also tried to bring onto the platform, and that complementary approach to engage and try to find a constructive trade deal very much missing on the platform. The third strategic insight, Canadian leadership vacuum at global level. So if you try to see closely, the interim leadership position as Prime Minister candidate, even before election, Prime Minister Mark Carney flying first to UK and symbolically to France. And the connectivity, UK, and especially the royal family being the head of the state, and the support that they require uh, under President Trump's threatening Canada being a part of US, and the support that they counted with UK, but UK's passive engagement, and especially also with the royal family, and the second visit to France, and again the connectivity to Quebec, and again the challenge for France, where it has serious national debt going more than $3.4 trillion, and the trade with United States and getting a deal under European Union becoming critical, trying to showcase that the Canadian leadership that needs to have that influence and might at global level, where it can try to see its complementary global friends coming on board to defend Canadian interest very much missing. So for the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, it will be a sign of serious accountability if the trade deal is not there, because this is the third minority government at federal level in Canada, and the bureaucrat turned politician, Mr. Mark Carney, had got the majority, but not like a majority parliament, on the concept that he will engage with the United States and will get a trade deal. So that full engagement we can try to see within months, where he had gone almost like on a retaliation mode, where he indicated elbows up and then trying to take the retaliation out, elbows down. It seems that the way scenarios emerging, it can be even elbowless. So if the trade deal is not there for him and his political career, it will be a big question mark, because the strongest accountability that will be drawn with Prime Minister Mark Carney will be, of course, the trade deal with the most important partner, because like the way we had indicated, there is no replacement of US as a trading partner, because there happens to be no other country that is so much dependent on trade with a single country like Canada to US, directly, indirectly, 85% of its economy related to the trade with US. So Mr. Mark Carney's desperate approach, since the trade deal is not with US, trying to come closer to China, the second trading partner, again trying to raise a lot of eyebrows, questions. Is it worth? Because it may be supporting some respective industry and provinces, especially agriculture produce and seafood, but at the cost of manufacturing, lumber, steel, aluminum. It is all going to be a very, very big, challenging and concerning scenario. So the desperate attempt to send ministers to China, to Europe, under CETA, the free trade agreement, trying to go personally to Mexico, it is all reflecting nothing concrete. And the scenario, if US, China not there, European Union not ready to open its platform for export, and the European Union going ahead with the 50% tariff on imported steel, it's all reflecting there is no buyer. And if they are trying to look towards the world's largest democracy, the most populated country, and the consumer base India, and the political divide making situation very impossible. So it is not only the Prime Minister Mark Carney's position kind of in a concerning mode, but also you can try to see all 10 provinces territory that tries to do trade separately with US, none of the political leader, any political stripe, maybe the opposition trying to indicate, hey, they can try to do better compared to the one that happens to be in office. No, right now, whatever political leader Canada has got uh, at federal, provincial, territorial, or municipal level happens to be the best, but there will be no outcome. Outcome in the sense that constructive engagement that can go towards trade, and the trade can be brought back under USMCA. So to showcase the same at the practical grassroots level, you can try to see all political leaders trying to dominate. So at federal level, we had already showcased Prime Minister Mark Carney, that represents Liberal Party, not able to engage in. So you can try to see the next scenario at provincial level, where you can try to see British Columbia Premier representing NDP, National Democratic Party, but Premier David Eby, almost impossible to forge a deal on lumber, the number one contributor to British Columbia's economy. So you can try to look towards Canada's 40% contributor to its GDP, the largest economic platform, Ontario province, the Premier, Doug Ford, representing Conservative Party. But again, the catch, that constructive engagement towards trade deal, not very much happening. So the concerning part, what's emerging, Canadian leadership for the first time, during the first term, it happens to be there of President Trump, but the second term, the Canadian leadership had been challenged at a global level, and what Canadians are realizing, leaders that has the might to influence, trying to network and bring complementary partners on platform that can defend Canadian interest, very much missing. And very soon, as the trade deal not emerging, and the desperate attempt to get trade deal with some of the promising economies, the situation that will be reflecting out at the start of 2025, where you can try to see all the 10 provinces territory unifying. But now, the desperate attempt to get a trade deal with any serious buying economy is going to prioritize one industry over another. In short, one province interest over another, and that is where it can bring the divisiveness in unity that we had seen. So if canola and seafood gets priority over steel, aluminum, automobile industry, or even lumber, or even mining platform, then the Canadian leadership happens to be very much under check. The fourth critical strategic insight, Canadians' negotiating approach as a dictating force, wrong compared to the needed complementary force approach. Retaliations, boycott, offloading Canadian product and services, anti-US sentiments, and even recognizing, appreciating consumer behavior opposing US trade platform, and unwarranted street busker demonstration by political leaders is not helping the Canadian cause. So the solution to the puzzle, that if Canada wants to get a trade deal with the United States, how the way it can be a complementary force assisting United States, its sole lucrative trade partner, where 85% of its economy, and literally almost all the eggs in one basket, can contribute in reduction of US national debt, and also narrowing the wide trade deficit. So the catch here is that complementary part requires that we are coming down to Canada coming down to realistic term and trying to find a constructive platform where its trade import imprints happens to be very much under check, corrected, and it is not uh, becoming a threatening platform to US core industries. If you can try to see very closely, the widening trade deficit, if you try to see from industry to industry, like for example, not only steel, aluminium, lumber, dairy product, which happens to be very well established in US, but Canada with its lower Canadian dollar uh, can really creep into the platform where it is not only substituting, can almost replace. And one of the serious correction that had gone in a very bad taste, especially with the US, happens to be the automobile sector. Not only Canada happens to be a powerful complementary assembly platform, but from that it is trying to raise, especially with electric vehicle battery, and the deal that was almost on the final stage with Volkswagen and US government had been pulled to Canada with almost 15 billion plus subsidy given by the Canadian government at St. Thomas, Ontario. It has gone in a complete distasteful way. The sense that with electric vehicle batteries plant, Canada trying to lead the platform and the automobile industry from US shifting towards Canada. So that complementary approach requires the realistic understanding on trade where Canada can fit into US and more on the industry that US having, trying to complement means trying to do a balancing part and not overdoing, basically trying to threaten that industry, but at the same time trying to find the provision where it can find grounds where the industry or the resources that are missing very much from Kennedy, from US platform can be brought in, and Canada can be a strong integrating force. And that sense that we need to be complementary and it needs to be reflected from the top and going all the way to the negotiation table. So you can try to see, although Canada had removed all that retaliation approach because it started impacting Canadian economy, but the thought process needs to be there when we are going for retaliation, how far stretch it happens to be, what the outcome. If we are trying to come with retaliation and within months we are trying to take back, and it is trying to bring divisiveness, especially on negotiating table, we are not going to go anywhere. So the very much needed complementary force approach Canada needs to bring if they need to get a trade deal. But right now, what we are trying to say, it is very much missing from the platform, and with the ratification of USMCA, Canada's position on USMCA platform very much under check. The fifth strategic insight concerning trade signal reflection, starting from President Trump's repeated assertion, not satisfied, whether it is happens to be the outcome on fentanyl and illegal migration to NATO contribution now that he requires from 3 to 5%, and all the way that we can try to say towards the Golden Dawn, where he wants Canada to be an equal partner. So it seems the expectation from Canada uh, mounting almost like Mount Everest, and for Canada to deliver becoming day by day, especially day by day, impossible. And Uh, Following that concern trade signals, uh, the very recent report card given by the U.S. Federal Attorney General Pam Bondi failed report on the outcome that they're expecting from Canada on fentanyl and the illegal migration situation compared to Mexico. Then you can try to see uh, the topmost diplomat in Canada, the US ambassador, Pete Hextra, repeatedly trying to indicate uh, the consumer behavior opposing US trade very much into negative play and needs to be engaged. And the Canadian political leader not engaging with the US ambassador and trying uh, to represent one or the other, direct, indirect, uh, the US ambassador, all the way communication to the White House and on the negotiating table, very much missing. And then you can try to see the white comparison, the way Mexico and Canada negotiating, where you can try to see the Mexican president and the trade team happens to be much more subtle, reflective, uh, and the way they are negotiating without any broader retaliation, boycotts, and all, compared to Canada, where it is trying to put all uh, the negativeness up front. And now we are trying to see that retaliations had also been brought down, but it has not brought the intended outcome. And the very big trouble spot that it is coming out as with implemented tariff, uh, various industry, and the various industry means all the core Canadian economic platform that includes steel, aluminium, automobile, lumber, seafood. To we can try to take even petroleum product and potash on 10%. All industry being impacted, and as the economy crumbles, the federal government approach to give them financial assistance instead of loan. When you give financial assistance, it qualifies as the troubling subsidy, which happens to be a complete no-no on a free trade agreement, and it can invite the unwarranted penalties, restriction, and in this case, leading to no trade deal. So the signals that are emerging are multiple and not constructive, and most of them are trying to give negative report cards, trying to showcase for Canada to get a deal with US now almost looks impossible. In conclusion, from SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence Forum, on the topic, high probability Canada will not get a trade deal with US. We would like to emphasize Canadian leaders and negotiators need to come on realistic terms that there is no replacement of US as a critical trading partner that single-handedly defines 85% of Canadian economy. The need of the current time, it requires a complementary approach that includes overall equality, fairness, and economic prosperity, and a self-imposed check, evaluation, and correction of Canadian trade imports, especially the ones that can threaten US core industries. The Canadian approach needs to be less public dressing and dramatic, and instead calls for more transparency, accountability, broad view integrity, pragmatic, rational, strategic approach of balancing cohesion, harmony, and broader trade ideological integration to draw a constructive deal on ratified USMCA. The in-depth analysis and projection thought-provoking platform, SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence,
initiated to create proactive awareness and sound preparedness in global trade implementation and practices. We appreciate your qualitative time to visit us to gain global know-how, and we equally count on your inputs, suggestions, feedback towards continuously improving our strategic communication platform. Thanks.